In this video, I will show you how to construct a mini coil vase using a template. Please note that I've already followed some steps to determine how big of a circle to use for the base of my mini vase. I explained how to do this in a separate video titled LC Ceramics Determining the Base. Please watch that video first if you have not already figured out the size circle you will need. It is really best not to guess at the size of your base, as it can make your vase way too wide or skinny. You won't realize this until you've put in quite a bit of effort and will either have to start over or build off template, which will make you lose the symmetry of your vase. Once you have your base template cut out, you're going to roll out a slab of clay that is slightly bigger than the template. Make sure to compress both sides of the slab using a rubber kidney. Remember, this is going to take away the texture from the slab roller, and it's essentially making that slab stronger. So don't forget to flip it over and compress both sides. Next, we're going to cut our slab to the size of our template. Use a needle tool for this. You want to try to cut your circle as evenly as possible. You should keep your needle tool straight up and down, perpendicular to the table when you're cutting, and take your time. The piece of paper template is going to stay on the slab throughout the entire process of building our mini coil vase. We'll be using a banding wheel in a little while, and this will help prevent our project from sticking to the banding wheel or from whatever surface we happen to have it on. First, I sit my base down on the banding wheel with the paper side down. I'm going to begin by scraping the template around the base. Notice how the template is laying flat on the banding wheel. It is very important that the template always sit flat so that the vase will be built symmetrically. It's difficult to see from this angle, but I have quite a few coils in front of me that I extruded earlier using the coil extruder in the classroom. You can also complete this project using hand-rolled coils if you choose, but I would make a bunch of them before you begin so you don't have to make one after every time you attach. I'm also very careful to keep those coils wrapped in damp paper towel and covered with plastic to keep them nice and soft. Coils from the extruder are sometimes really soft and can be misshapen. As you can see here, I like to roll them out a little bit on my canvas to make them a bit rounder. I just think it makes it look a little bit nicer as I'm constructing. Next, I'm going to attach my first coil to my base. This coil I have is pretty long and kind of difficult to work with, so I'm just going to shorten it some. I'll save the other half of the coil to use for my next coil layer. I'm now just going to overlap the rest of the coil as I begin to measure the coil to fit my template. Now I'm using my template to get my coil started here. My coil is sitting on top of my base, and I want the base to be sitting flat on the banding wheel, and I'm lining up that coil so that it's touching the template. As I begin to measure my coil, I want you to notice how I use the template to measure it. I move that template about half an inch or so at a time, and then I adjust the coil so that it touches the template. Sometimes I slightly have to push it in a little bit, the coil. Sometimes I have to slightly push the coil out, but I want to make sure that my template is touching not only the base, but also the coil. So it is also helpful to kind of get down and look at this from a better eye point view so that you can see that it's touching. And it's really important that it touches all the way around the template, not just on one side or the other. This is going to keep your mini coil vase round, so it's going to be circular and will also keep it symmetrical. Once you've measured your coil all the way around and you pretty much have an idea of how big it needs to be, you're going to be cutting your coil. Notice how my coil is overlapping itself. When I cut, I want to make sure I'm cutting through the side where it overlaps, and I'm going to use my fettling knife to cut through at an angle. It's also important to not cut on your base, but off to the side. Now, I want you to know that this is going to be considered a rough cut for this first coil. I'm going to need to use my template again. You'll see here in a moment to measure again. So do not attach this coil yet. You will need to make some adjustments. So I'm just going to go back through with my template. It is again sitting flat on the banding wheel, and I'm going to adjust my coil again. And you're going to notice that your coil will still be a little bit bigger than it needs to be. So let it overlap itself as you go. Once you've measured all the way around again, you can either take the coil off and cut it again, or just slightly trim the coil where it overlaps, making sure to cut at that same angle, and then keep adjusting until the coil fits the template all the way around. This part's really important if as you're going around, if the coil doesn't fit the template, either if the coil doesn't touch or if it's pushing off to the other side, just make sure you make adjustments. It's better to just start over with a fresh coil if you've made it too short than to use a coil that's too small. I could tell you that. If you attach this first coil and it's not the right size, you'll never get it right. So, taking a little bit of extra time at this point to make sure you're making those adjustments as you go will pay off in the long run. When you're sure that the coil is the right size, it touches the template going all the way around, you know you're ready to make your attachment. So we're going to score and slip this first coil to the base. And this coil should be sitting on top of the base, not being attached to the side of it. With some of the templates, you might be right close to the edge, but it should still be resting on the base. Notice that I'm also scoring the bottom of my coil where it will attach to the base and the edges of the coil where they will attach to each other. Make sure you score the clay in both places very well. Next, we'll be adding slip to where we just scored our surface. I'm using magic water as slip for this, and I'm making sure to add slip to all parts where I scored. I'm then just kind of gently pressing my coil ends together and then placing my coil down on my base. I'm going to have to adjust one more time with my template, but first I'm just making sure that the coil feels like it's sitting on top of the base pretty evenly all the way around and just kind of checking that it's circular. I'm now going to go in one more time with my template sitting flat on the banding wheel, and I want to make sure that the coil is still touching the template. Even after I made sure the first time, now that I'm putting the coil back on, I need to make sure that it's sitting on the base correctly. So this part's really what's going to make sure that my mini vase is going to be symmetrical and round. So I'm just taking the time again to go all the way around about every half inch or so. It's important to make these adjustments while the slip is still wet and you can adjust that coil. While my slip is drying, now that I have it adjusted, we're going to be putting a reinforcement coil in, attaching that coil where the base and your first coil meet. You'll only do this one time. You'll only use one reinforcement coil rather for this project. And the purpose of it, it's going to help to fill in the seam where the coil and the base meet. The weight of the walls as we start to build up with our mini vases, the weight of the walls is all going to go right there where the coil and the base meet. So I just rolled a coil quite a bit thinner than the coil that I used for my wall. The thinner you can make that coil, the easier it's going to be to blend in. Notice I didn't score or slip that coil. I just kind of placed it in there. And now I'm just blending the seam of my coil so it doesn't open as I blend my reinforcement. So I'm going to be using a modeling tool, the rounded side of a modeling tool, to blend this coil. And it's really important that you use your other hand as you're blending to support the walls so you don't change the shape of the coil you work so hard to adjust. I'm starting by just blending half of the coil. So my reinforcement coil, I'm blending half of it down so that it's blending into the base. And then I'm going to scrape the other half of the coil up the wall. What this is doing is forcing that coil of clay into the seam where the walls and the base meet. It's going to clean that up and make it much stronger. It's really important that you blend this coil in really well and don't just leave it sitting in there. When you're done blending, you really shouldn't know that there was a coil there. I like to make sure that I blend and compress really well where that seam was so that it won't create a crack later as the clay dries. I'm going to continue on building my mini coil vase, stacking coils on top of each other. As I begin planning my second coil, something important to know as you put the coils on top of each other, where you cut the coil ends and attach them together, that's going to be a weak point in your vase. So you want to try to avoid having all of those cut coil ends stacked directly on top of each other. I try to stagger those a little bit so that I don't have cracks that form vertically in the walls of my coil vase. So I'm going to continue. I'm adding my second coil now on top of my first. I'm back to using my template. And again, my template's nice and flat on the banding wheel. I'm adjusting that coil, pushing it in a little bit or pushing it out slightly so that it's touching the edge of the template. And my base and first coil are still in line. I'm just doing this slowly. Again, I'm rotating my banding wheel about a half inch or so all the way around. And I'm going to let my coil overlap itself. Again, remember this first time we go around and we adjust and measure that coil, this is going to be a rough cut. And then I will take steps to cut my coil and then readjust it and make those adjustments so that the coil will fit the template going all the way around. I'm going to continue on with my third coil. And after this third coil, though, I'm going to come back after I have it attached and after my slip has dried a little while. I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about how to blend the coils. Whenever you're building with coils, it's really important that you blend either the inside of the coil vase or the outside. For this particular project, we're going to be blending the outside of the vase. So once I have my third coil attached, I'll come back and show you how to do that. I like to begin blending after I have a few coils attached. That way I'm kind of like in the groove for getting my coils measured, but I will say that it is a nice change of pace to blend the coils. So, after every three or maybe even after every two coils, you can start blending. Now, I'm using a modeling tool to blend mine, and I'm starting off by pulling that modeling tool down over my coils. And I'm just trying to blend them in so that they aren't round anymore, so that they're really kind of blending in to create a flat surface or a flat wall. Um, Eventually, here though, I am going to kind of adjust and look at my vase from multiple angles and kind of blend the coils into the contour shape of the template. Now, this is going to look rough at first. It's not going to be super smooth. So, the smoothing part of our vase is going to come later. And actually, we won't get these perfectly smooth until one of the very last steps after we've constructed our entire vase. So, get the coils blended. And when I say blended, I just mean so that you cannot see the space in between the coils. Make sure you also clean your modeling tool off occasionally as you go. Sometimes it's easy. You're going to see I'm kind of adjusting here, and I'm maybe even going to grab a different banding wheel to help me. These first coils can be kind of difficult to blend, so working on a taller banding wheel will help you blend the bottom a little bit easier, so you can go right down off of the bottom using your banding wheel. I'm going to do this all the way around, and then I'll come back and show you how we'll use the template to kind of scrape the walls to help make sure we haven't lost that shape that we're going for. Okay, after I've blended in all of my coils, I'm gonna put my project back on the banding wheel, and I'm gonna use the template to kind of scrape along the walls. As I'm doing this, it's really important to note that my template is sitting flat again on the banding wheel. And notice that I'm holding my fingers pretty close to where the template meets the walls of the clay. This will just help make the template a little bit more sturdy. I'm also occasionally pressing outward from the inside of the vase with my hand so that the clay touches the template all the way around. My clay is still really soft at this point, so I can still manipulate it a little bit. So I'm just, again, slightly pressing it out as I'm scraping the template along the walls. This will just help to make sure that I haven't lost the shape of my template. And I'm going to do this, going all the way around. I'm going to use this technique occasionally, but not necessarily scraping after every coil I attach. I will, however, scrape after each time that I blend. So I'm going to just continue scraping until I'm happy that it's even all the way around. Another thing to note, our clay is really soft right now, and as we're building with coils, we're going to be adding weight to the walls. And if the clay is too soft, while we attach heavier and heavier clay, it could collapse. So after every three coils or so, or before the end of class, it's a good idea to blow dry the coils that you have just attached during that class, or the last 3 to 4 coils that you attached during class. I'm going to blow dry these until they feel like they're in the soft leather hard stage. Remember, clay that's anywhere between plastic and soft leather hard. You could still attach clay to clay without having any problems because the clay hasn't yet begun to shrink. As I'm blow drying, I'm making sure to spin the banding wheel so that the clay is getting dried evenly all the way around. I don't want to dry it out too much, just enough to add on another coil. Now, if there was time during class and you could continue to add coils at this point, please continue to add coils. However, if at this point it's time for the end of class, I'll be showing you later on in the video how to store your project, but let's just say that at this point you can't move on. After you've blow dried the clay, you're just going to drape the top part of your coil vase with a little bit of damp paper towel, and then seal that really tight in a bag. That way, when you come back to class the next time, it will be soft enough for you to continue working on. You would, however, want to make sure before you continue adding coils to your vase, make sure that the clay hasn't gotten too soft while it was stored in your bag. If you need to blow dry it a little bit before you begin building again during class, make sure you do that. I have seen many coil vases collapse under the weight of too heavy of clay or clay that got too wet. So please make sure you take the time to monitor the temperature of your clay. So I'm going to continue building my mini vase, and I'm going to speed up the video here in a little bit, but just a couple reminders and some things to remember as you continue building your vase. Remember that as you're attaching the coils, you're starting off with a rough cut. You're using that template every step of the way, making sure that it's sitting flat down on the banding wheel and you're measuring about every half inch. Also, I wanted to note that you're going to have some little cuts in your coil vase from where the template is cutting in when you're measuring. Please don't worry about that. I mentioned earlier that towards the end of the project, one of the last things we do, we're going to be smoothing out that vase really well. So any little imperfections like that we'll be able to fix. But if your vase does not fit the template, that is not something that you'll be able to fix later. So again, make sure you use that template every step of the way and trim that coil. Make sure it's the right size as you build up. As I continue with my vase, I'm going to add another couple of coils, attaching them before I blend. I just find blending is easier after I've attached a couple coils. After I've attached maybe 3 or 4 coils, I'll be blow drying mine again. It's important to only blow dry after you've attached a few coils. And when you're blow drying, like my next round of blow drying, I'm really just going to focus on those top coils that I've just attached. I don't necessarily want to re-blow dry the coils, those first 3 coils that I've already blow dried, unless they feel like they're really, really soft and need to stiffen up a little bit. Again, make sure though that you're blending those coils while the clay is still soft and then scraping with the template before you do any blow drying. Once I get closer to the top of the template, I'll come back in and kind of talk about how to finish the top. At this point, I'm pretty much have built my coil vase to the top of the template. I don't show it in this video, but when you get to this point, if your coil vase is a little bit uneven at the rim, it can be trimmed down to make it even, or you can use a sure form, one of the shredder tools to kind of shred that down to make it a little bit more level. You also have a decision to make when you get to the top of your vase. Some of the templates, depending on how thick your coils are, can end in a weird spot. So I felt like my vase didn't quite look finished. So I'm going to add an extra coil to the top of mine. This is going to be off template, so I'm going to be adding this in kind of on its own without using the template. So I still want to make sure my coil is nice and presentable. This is going to be, the top of my vase, so it will be seen. So I'm just taking a moment to roll that coil out just a little bit. Now I'm just gonna measure that coil going around the rim of my vase, and I've decided that I want my vase to flare out a little bit more at its rim. So I'm attaching the coil so that it's sitting slightly to the outside of the top of the vase. And as I'm adjusting my coil and measuring it, I'm also looking at it from above to make sure it's circular, and I'm looking at it from a side view to make sure that it's going to look symmetrical all the way around. So I'm going to make a few little adjustments here and there as I notice areas that need adjusting. Once I'm happy with the size of my coil, I'm going to remove it from my vase to make my cut. And again, I'm going to cut at that diagonal. This will just help make sure that it joins up nicely so I won't see that seam on my rim. I'm going to also adjust it to make sure that it's as circular as possible. I'm going to make sure to score the edges of the coil and also where my coil is going to attach to the vase. I'll then add my slip and join the coil to the vase. I'm going to let that slip dry for a few minutes, but while the slip is wet, you'll see that I'll be able to adjust the coil and decide where it's going to sit best on my vase. At this point, I've let my slip dry for a little while, and I want you to see the inside of the vase there. You can kind of tell the vase, the top of the vase looks a little rough. And now that I've let the slip dry a little bit, I'm gonna blend the inside this time. And depending on which template you've chosen for this project, I would recommend that you blend the inside top of the vase where you would see it. So if we had flowers in the vase and you can see a little bit of the inside at the top, it just will look a little bit more finished if you blend those coils, making it smooth. So on this particular template, I really can only see two of the coils, so I'm just going to blend those together. I'm gently using a modeling tool to blend the top coil that I just attached into the coil below it. Now I'm holding my coil pot in a weird way so that you can see how I'm blending. While you're doing this, you can have your coil pot sitting down on a banding wheel or in front of you to make it easier. I'm going to speed up the video at this point, but I'll come back to talk you through the next step. I'm also going to take some time to blend that last coil that I put on, I'm going to blend that into the outside of my vase a little bit. This is just going to clean up where I made that attachment with my slip. I can kind of decide with this last coil if I want to blend it all the way in so that it completely forms into my wall, or if I want it to kind of almost like sit on the edge where it looks like you can almost see the seam. I'm going to choose to have it look like it's just kind of sitting on the edge or the top of my vase, giving it a decorative band going around, but I still want to clean up where the coil meets the walls. I'm just gently blending with my modeling tool. I might even blend a little bit with my finger and with a blending brush, but I'll come back to talk about the next step after I've blended this outside coil. I'm just gonna kind of touch up this coil with my blending brush and just a little bit of water. If you chose to blend this top coil into the wall, you might not have to use a blending brush at this point, but because I wanted my rim to be kind of decorative and almost a band going around the top where I kind of want to see the seam where I made that attachment, I'm just smoothing that out with a little bit of water on my blending brush, not a whole lot, just enough that I can smooth that out. Now that I've attached my last coil and I've taken the time to blend and smooth, I'm just adjusting it to make sure I like it. While the clay is still soft, I can make some small adjustments. Once you're happy with your vase, the next step is going to be to smooth out the walls of the vase. As you were blending your coils together and scraping with the template, you created some pits or some deep areas in the surface of your clay, as you can see here. I'm going to show you how to fill these in. You do want to make sure that your clay is not beyond dry leather hard. Now I'm going to take some really soft clay and I'm going to flatten it really, really thin, as thin as you can get it with soft clay. And it is really important that your clay is nice and soft. This is going to work as a patch almost to patch in the shallow areas or the deep areas rather. So now I'm going to score over the area that looks like it needs to be filled in with some clay. And I'm going to add a little bit of slip. And then that flat piece of clay that I made, I'm not going to score that. I'm just going to press it down onto the scored area. And I'm pressing this down all around to make sure that there's no air that's trapped and just to make sure it has a good bond. I'm then going to be using my rubber kidney to compress the clay. And you have to make sure that you compress the clay. I'm not going to just leave it sitting on there, but I'm now going to just start scraping and compressing. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to go from different directions. I'm occasionally going to clean my rubber kidney off. You are going to be scraping a lot of the clay off of the walls as you're doing this. And what should happen is as you go over the walls with the rubber kidney, the clay patch that you added on is going to fill in those deep areas, making your walls much more smooth. So you really won't see when you're done with this where you did your blending. Now I want to encourage you to not just put a bunch of clay everywhere, all over your walls, and then try to blend it in. You only should do this in small areas where you see the clay is cutting into deep, like if you have like a little hole almost that the clay would be filling in. We're going to go through with another tool after we fill in our craters that's really going to smooth these out even more. Just be careful not to add too much clay in this way and make sure that you compress so that there's no air trap between the clay. if you do not compress the clay well enough, those pieces that you put on could start to peel away as the clay dries. So really take your time and blend that clay in. Now on mine here, I'm gonna continue adding small patches where I think I need it and compressing that clay in with my rubber kidney. I'm going to speed up the video, and then once I'm done, I'll come back and show you a final way to really smooth out the walls of your vase. Now that I've filled in all of my craters, I am going to be going in with a metal rib tool to really smooth out my vase. Now, my vase is just up beyond the soft leather hard stage, so it's getting a little bit closer to being the dry leather hard stage. You want to make sure you're not using the the metal rib until the clay is a little bit more stiff, as this is really going to cut into the clay. But I really like using the metal rib at this stage because it's really going to help me to shape my vase, especially if I have some little imperfections, or maybe as I was building, I went off template a little bit and a coil sticking out weird. I can really shave down some places with this metal rib tool. So you're going to be scraping with the tool. And remember that the metal rib can be flexed, and we're going to be smoothing something that's round. So make sure you are flexing the rib as you go, kind of like that, and then cleaning it all off as well. If there's dried clay stuck on the metal tool, it will scratch into your clay. So keep that nice and clean. Now I'm also occasionally going to go in and do some more smoothing with my finger or with my thumb. That'll just help to kind of pick up some of the places that the metal rib was not able to smooth down. I'm now just going to take some time to smooth out my entire vase with the metal rib. I'm going to take my time when I'm doing this, and I'm really going to look at my vase from all angles and use the tool going in multiple directions. So this is going to take me a while. I'll go ahead and speed up the video again, but when I come back, when we're done, we're not quite done with our vases. There's one more skill that I'm going to teach you. I'm going to be teaching you how to use a sprig mold, so stay tuned to learn how to use a sprig mold. So I'm just about done smoothing my little vase here. I'm just going to spend a few more minutes just looking it over and blending and smoothing with my hands just a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and store my vase just to add a little bit of moisture back into it for when we add our sprig mold. So I'm going to just wrap my mini vase in some damp paper towel, and I'm going to be sealing it in my plastic bag. And just a reminder that anytime you have to stop the project throughout, let's say you get halfway done and it's time to clean up, just a reminder that before you store your project, especially if you've added quite a few coils, make sure you blow dry those coils before you wrap in damp paper towel. And I know that seems strange to blow dry and then to wrap in damp paper towel, but the damp paper towel will just help to keep your clay at that temperature so that it doesn't get any drier. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap mine up, and I am going to let it sit for a little while so it can get a little bit of water back into the clay, and then I'll come back and show you how to use the sprig mold. Okay, so this here is an example of a sprig mold. And a sprig mold is made out of plaster, and in the plaster are going to be different shapes of different things. So the sprig mold that I have in front of me is a mold of the alphabet, and there's every letter from A to Z. What we're going to be doing is pressing clay into these shapes. Now, for yours, when you get to make yours, if you're in my class, you'll get to choose from a lot of different molds that I have. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get some soft clay, and I've already pre-wedged this, and I'm just kind of blending it so it doesn't have a lot of wrinkles in it. I'm going to place the clay over the shape that I want to press into, and I'm going to press my hands down on top. So right now I'm just kind of forcing the clay down into the shape that I chose for my mold. I'm now going to use a rubber kidney to compress that clay. So as I'm doing this, I'm compressing and I'm pulling the clay, and I'm going to be scraping the clay off as I'm pressing the clay down into the mold. I'm starting each time I pull my rubber kidney, I'm starting in the middle of the area so that I don't accidentally pull the clay out of the shape that I'm trying to make the mold of. I'm going to continue scraping clay off until the clay is level with the rest of the mold. So this is going to take me just a few more minutes. Right now, I'm using the round side of the rubber kidney, and here in a minute, I'm going to turn that over and I'm going to use now the flat side. And I'm going to just kind of carefully start scraping close to the edge of the shape that I'm trying to make. Now, it's really important that you take the time to scrape this down until it's flush with the rest of the mold. Remember that when we attach pieces of clay, the clay should not be any thicker than our thumb. And if we press the clay down into the mold and it's too thick, it's going to stick off of our mini vase in a weird way. So take the time to really scrape these down. They're going to look much nicer. They're going to have a much better the detail in some of the designs is going to show up so much nicer if you take your time. Once you've scraped most of the clay off, so you can see now that it's nice and flush with the rest of the mold, and you can almost see the outline of the letter A that I've pressed my clay into. I'm now going to gather up my extra soft clay that I scraped off, and I'm going to use this almost as a plunger, and I'm going to plunge down onto the clay in the mold, and I'm going to carefully pull up, pulling the clay right out of the mold. Sometimes it's not, maybe doesn't come out quite so quickly as mine did. You may have to go through that a couple of times to get your piece of clay to come up. When these come out of the mold, they're gonna maybe have some rough edges. So I'm gonna take a minute now to use a needle tool just to trim around my shape, getting rid of any weird little edges that don't belong. So I'm just gonna do this all the way around. While I was working on my sprig mold, I had my mini coil vase still wrapped up in the damp paper towel and my plastic bag. So now that I have my sprig ready to be attached, I'm going to take my vase out of the bag and unwrap it from my paper towel. I'm going to take a minute to just kind of look at my vase now that it's been, wrapped in paper towel and in a bag, and there might be some little imperfections in the nice smooth surface that I made. So, just take a look at it, make sure it looks good. The next step, though, then we are going to be attaching the sprig to the vase. So as I'm kind of blending and looking at my vase, I'm trying to find a placement on there where it's going to look nice. So I found a place, and I've just kind of put the letter A on there, and then you want to make sure that you're pressing your shape down completely onto the vase so that it takes the curve of the wall of your vase. It shouldn't be sticking off at all. Now, I haven't attached it yet, but I've just kind of figured out where I want to place it. I'm then going to use a needle tool. I'm not going to cut, but I'm just gently tracing around my shape. This is just going to show me where I need to score and slip. So I'm going to do this all the way around. So now I'm ready to score and slip the two pieces of clay together. So just a reminder, anytime you're attaching two pieces of clay together, you want to make sure that you score and slip really well. And I will show you how to blend these also, but take the time to score the clay. I'm going to take the time to score both the walls of my vase and my letter A. I'm going to add slip to both pieces, and I'm going to press them together. I'm then going to let my slip dry for a few minutes before I come back to show you how to blend the edges. Blending is so much easier once you've allowed the slip to dry some. When you press your sprig onto the walls of your vase, make sure you're pressing down pretty well so that there's no trapped air between the sprig and the walls of your vase. So that way, as the slip's drying, it can fill in all those areas. Now that I've let the slip dry for a little while, I'm ready to blend the edges of my sprig. I'm going to use the modeling tool for this, and I like the curved edge. When I blend the edge of my sprig, I'm doing so nice and gentle. I'm taking my time, and I'm just pulling the tiniest little bit of clay from where the sprig attached to the wall, and I'm pulling that out into the wall a little bit more. And what this is doing, it's filling in the seam where the sprig and the wall attach together. And this step is so important. Not only is it going to make the craftsmanship of your vase look so much nicer, it's also going to help the sprig to dry at the same rate as the vase without separating. So it's just going to help keep the sprigged shape from pulling away from the walls of the vase as it dries. So please take the time to really blend your edges. Remember, this isn't the last step. After we blend these edges, we're going to also be smoothing. So I'm going to continue blending every single edge all the way around my sprig, including for mine on the inside of the A, and then I'll come back and show you how to smooth out those edges. All right, so I have blended all the way around all of my edges with my modeling tool, but as you can see, there's still a lot of marks from where I blended. So I want to take the time now to smooth those out. So I have a bucket that's filled with a little bit of water in it and my stiff blending brush. I'm going to get my blending brush wet, just kind of swish it around in the water, and then blot it off on the canvas so it's not soaking wet. Remember, you don't want to soak your project. You're then just going to use that brush to kind of paint those edges. You're just going over where you blended with the modeling tool. This is going to help to smooth out those marks, making this look a lot nicer. Now, even from when you push the clay into the mold, some of the molds in class are getting kind of old and there might be scratches that come out with the clay. You can use your brush to clean up any little imperfections that you see in your sprig design if you think you need it. Make sure that you're blending and smoothing these really nicely. This is going to be one of the very last steps for the project. However, we're going to come back one more time to take that piece of paper off the bottom. I'll show you how to do that. You'll be carving your name and class code if your clay's ready for it today. You might need to wait till the next class, and I'll be showing you how to store these so that they can get to the dry leather hard stage for turning in. So I'll be back after I'm done smoothing. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way my mini vase is looking. I'm now going to take the piece of paper off of the bottom. This can be kind of tricky because the paper may have kind of gotten embedded into the clay down at the bottom when you were doing your smoothing. You can use a loop tool to kind of help you pull up an edge of the paper and just kind of scrape it off. Once you can get a handle on it, you can kind of pull it off. Um, Please do try to get as much of that paper off the bottom as you can. The paper, it would burn away during the firing process, but it also creates fumes that we don't really want. So getting the paper off there as much as possible is appreciated. Now I just want to take a little bit of time to smooth out the bottom and the base of my project and like the bottom edge of the foot. Some of these vases are going to end up having a little foot on them, and you don't want those edges to be sharp. So remember, we always want nice soft edges. So take a little bit of time, use your finger, just kind of turn the vase around in your hand and try to soften that edge a little bit. If you took some big chunks out of the bottom of yours when you were peeling the paper off the bottom, you can also use a metal rib tool to kind of smooth that out even more. So I'm just going to smooth out the bottom, and then my clay is pretty much close to the dry leather hard stage at this point. So once I'm done smoothing here, I'm going to carve my name and my class code into the bottom of this. So only do that though if the clay is in the dry leather hard stage. If it's not, we're going to be wrapping these up one more time before they would be ready to be turned in anyways. So I'll come back and show you how to wrap these up for one last storage before we turn them in. When you're completely done smoothing out your vase and the bottom looks good and all parts of it you're happy with, we're going to be wrapping these in dry paper towel and also stuffing the inside with dry paper towel. Now, this part's important. Please make sure that you only stuff one kind of longer piece of dry paper towel, kind of feed it down inside your vase so that part of the paper towel is sticking out of the top. This will make it easier for me to pull that paper towel out before I fire it. But it also helps to dry out the inside of the vase so it can dry equally with the outside. I'm also going to wrap my entire outside of my vase in dry paper towel all the way around. And then I'm going to seal this in a bag and I'm going to leave it in the bag overnight or until next class. And then when I come in next class, my clay should be in the dry leather hard stage. And if I wasn't able to carve my name today, I definitely would be able to do that next class and turn in my project. And then that's it. You're done with your mini coil vase. Now you just get to wait to get it back from your bisque fire and glaze it. Thank you guys for listening. I can't wait to see what you create.